JMM Radio. JMM Radio.
You have just heard a song from the Jesuit Music Ministry. Follow jescom.ph on Spotify and Jescom Music on YouTube. We are also on iTunes and Deezer.
Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. Radyo Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo Katipunan, the voice of the Blue Eagle. Tara na't simulan ng inyong umaga sa mga magagandang refleksyon tungkol sa ating buhay at pananampalataya. Kasama sina Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, Father J. Boy Gonzales at Father Nono Alfonso ng Kapisanan ni Jesus, Father Cali Llamado ng Manila Cathedral at Binibining Risa Singson Kaupeng ng Light of Jesus Community dito sa Kapit Pandasal sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
May alitan sa simbahan? Ako si Risa Singson Kaupeng, book author at editor. Magkapit pandasal muna tayo. May tanong ako sa inyo. Saan mahahanap ang pinakabanal na mga Katoliko? Ang personal kong sagot dyan ay sa simbahan, araw-araw. Pero alam ko na kahit na ang mga lamang simbahan ay makasalanan din dahil isa na ako doon. Kung ang pinakabanal ng mga tao ay mahahanap sa simbahan, di dapat wala nang alitan o hidwaan doon. Pero ang katotohanan ay maraming mga naglilingkod sa Diyos ang hindi nagkakasundo. Kahit nga mga charismatic communities ay nahahati dahil sa di pagkakaintindihan ng mga elders nito. Pati ang mga apostol ay nagalit kay Santiago at Juan nang hiniling nila kay Jesus na sila ang maupo sa kaliwa at kanan niya. Ang sagot ni Jesus sa kanyang mga alagad ay siya rin sigurong tugon niya sa ibig maging banal, ngunit may kaaway. Sabi ni Jesus, ang sino man sa inyo na nais na maging dakila ay dapat maging lingkod ninyo. At ang sino mang nais maging pinuno ay dapat maging alipin ng lahat. Meron ka bang di makasundo sa simbahan o sa komunidad mo? Tanungin mo, paano kung mapaglilingkuran ang taong ito? Tayo magdasal. Jesus, tulungan niyo kaming maging banal sa pamamagitan ng pagmahal at paglingkod, lalo na sa mga taong mahirap mahalin. Amen.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay Atenista, sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, radyo, radyo,
Palalimin ang kamalayan sa mga isyong napapanahon. Makisangkot at makiisa kasama ang Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan, ang socio-political apostolate ng Kapisanan ni Jesus. Ito ang Kuwentuhang Bayan mula alas 11 ng umaga tuwing Biyernes dito lang sa Radyo-Katipunan 87.9 FM. Dahil naniniwala kami na posible ang isang mas mabuting lipunan at maaari itong simulan sa isang kwentuhan.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Welcome to another Friday episode dito sa Radyo Katipunan. Muli ako po si John Warren Varquez at kasama ko po ngayon si Sir Carlo Abadines, ang aming Associate Director for Programs sa Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan. And welcome to our weekly episode na pinamagatang Radyo Katipunan, Kuwentuhang Bayan, Kuwentuhang Pamahalaan, the importance of the opposition in a democratic country. Hi Sir Carlo, good morning.
Yan, good morning din, John, no? Masaya naging nandito ulit, no? At maganda yung papag-usapan natin ngayong araw kasi medyo importante po talaga siya, no? I think in the past episodes, pinag-usapan na natin kung how the current administration, no? The Marcos administration has been forming up, no? Pero parang hindi pa natin masyado naririnig, no? Kung ano din nangyayari sa opposition side naman, no? Kung ano yung formations. Alam natin may iilan na minority block sa mga legislation. But other than that, no, parang maganda siguro na mapag-usapan nga natin yung topic naman ng opposition as the administration continues its plans moving forward.
Yeah, tama Sir Carl. Kasi now, of course, we are very familiar na with the slogan, no, with the promoting of unity of the current administration, di ba? So parang sabihin natin, no, is the opposition or is the work of the opposition parang hadlang ba siya, no, para magkaroon ng true unity or something like that, no? Or ano ba talaga yung kanang purpose of the opposition, no? Is it a vital aspect of a democratic country or parang ano lang siya, parang mema lang siya o parang may masabi lang tayo, no? Parang gano'n, no? And of course our guest for this morning is very much knowledgeable with the field that we will be talking about, no. Tapos I even watched one of her series in Arete, and I really love yung question ni ng ating guest ngayon, parang does democracy work in our country ba, or that was a question, no, of our guest for this morning, no. So maybe we can introduce na our guest, Sir Carlo.
Yes, go ahead. So yeah, so just so that we can start our discussion, no? So we've invited Dr. Carmel or Abao, or more known as Ma'am Melay Abao, a professor in Ateneo de Manila University inside the Political Science Department. Ayan po. So welcome po, Doc Abao, and thank you for accepting our invitation po sa ating programa ngayong araw.
Of course. Good morning sa inyo. Yan, Carlo.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we can start it off, no, John, with the questions. Let's go.
Yes. So Doc, again, thank you for responding to our request, no, and for sure, no, our viewers will really learn a lot, no, kung ano ba talaga yung work ng ating opposition. No? But before going into the discussion on the opposition, can you give us an overview of like what democracy is, di ba? Kasi in our theme, no, we have here the importance of the opposition in a democratic country, no?
Okay. So, ang democracy kasi, well, best to discuss the history, no, and the origins, kasi that was really invented by the Greeks, right? Particularly yung mga Athenians. And it comes from the Greek word demos, meaning people, kasi at the time, the people was considered a political unit, no? Because the Greeks, well, the Athenians had what they call the assembly, parang general assembly talaga, na tinitipon nila lahat ng tao. Yun nga lang, kailangan lalaki ka, kailangan native Athenian ka. Pero the idea that they were the people, they were being consulted on almost everything, you know, from the water system to the sewage system to whether or not they will go to war, for example. The assembly would meet and they would vote using pebbles. using stones. So, white pebble for yes, black pebble for no. So, ang democracy kasi, so ang democracy talaga, ang central idea niya is consent, 'di ba? Based on these origins, no? And even still today, that's the central idea na tinatanong yung mga tao, hindi iilan lang ang nagdedesisyon tungkol sa mga bagay-bagay na nakakaapekto sa lahat. So, ganun ang demokrasya, hindi iilan lang. Okay? And even today, that's still the indicator of democracy. Tinatanong ba, payag ka ba na ito yung mga leader nyo? Kaya nag-election. Payag ka ba na ganito yung polisiya natin? Kasi that will bind all of us. Kaya may kongreso. Ganyan. So, ang difference lang siguro from the time of the Greeks and to now is that ours is what we call a representative democracy. So, hindi na GAGA, hindi na General Assembly. Kasi imagine mo, ilang milyon na tayo. So talaga, may representatives ka. So now, the minimum requirement to be a democracy is just repeated elections. Regular repeated elections. So, kaya ngayon, pag sinasabi, sino lang ang hindi demokratikong bansa? China, yung mga communist states sa Southeast Asia, yung ganyan. Kasi, sila lang ang hindi nagpapa-eleksyon. Okay? So hanggat nagpapa-election ka, kasi ibig sabihin mo na kinuha mo yung consent ng mga tao kung sino magre-represent sa kanila, demokrasya siya. That's it's a very minimalist definition. Okay? Of course, the definition has already evolved, no? Marami ng elemento ang democracy. Rights, freedoms, obligations, accountability, people's participation, so hindi lang representatives. So, ganun yung definition niya, yung kasalita lahat. Parang ganun talaga yung basic definition ng demokrasya.
Okay. And I guess, no, so we've kind of differed that, no, and we've kind of gotten a sense, no, that in a non-democratic government, in a sense, there is an authoritarian, di ba, a figure or just very few people, no, who actually give them.
Yeah, lack of people's consent. Diba?
Yes.
So,
that's interesting, no? Kasi I think you also mentioned the expanded definitions, no? I guess based on a cursory assessment on your sense, how do you describe the democracy siguro ngayon sa Pilipinas, no? We do have regular elections, but I guess on the expanded side, no? What's your sense?
Yeah. Alam mo, ang saya ng discussion na yan. Sa mga classical lang yan. Dahil ganyan. Sige nga, democracy ba tayo? Yes, ma'am, nag-election tayo. Democracy ba tayo? Kahit yung tipong 50 journalists in one day namatay. Democracy ba yan? So, ganyan na. Ang dami na namin discussion. In the literature, there are also many characterizations of Philippine democracy. Siguro ang most dominant and para mas klaro is elite democracy. Which really means that the institutions for representation, yung representatives mo, na pinipili mo, yung mga institutions na yon na may representatives, captured na siya ng mga elite. Usually, ibig sabihin, mga mayayaman, sila na lang yon. So, decision-making is done by the few, not by the many, as originally, was the concept of democracy. And certainly not done by all, di ba? But if you ask me, so sa akin, tama ito. Kasi from Marcos Sr. to Marcos Jr., it has always been a coalition of elites. No? Our country has always been governed by a coalition of elites. Nagbabago lang ito konti, depende kung nagbabago yung configuration ng mga elites, depende kung sino nag-aaway, depende kung sino nagkakasundo. Pero decision-making is really left to the families. I mean, ever since EDSA, ever since 1986, when we had our new constitution, for example, ang new constitution sabi, yung ano natin, dapat may magsasaka, may wala naman yun sa totoo lang. Diba? Party list, pero ngayon, number one sa mga party list, mga bilyonaryo. So, sila talaga. So, decision-making is, but it's still called a democracy kasi binoboto sila ng tao. So, yung minimum requirement ng pagboto, parang yun na yun. But if you ask me, my characterization of Philippine democracy would be, it's not a substantive democracy. It's just a formal one. Parang compliance lang. Basta may election ka, Pero yung lahat na ibang laman niya, wala. So parang kumbaga sa tao, ay forma lang. Parang ganon. Forma lang siya. Wala siyang laman. Given na elites lang ang naging desisyon. Yun pa lang. Hindi na yung demokrasya. Kasi ang demokrasya nga, representative ng iba, bansa ba natin, elites lang? Hindi naman eh. Minority nga
Yeah.
sila eh. Mas marami naman ang Class D nga. Ilan yun? 48%. Something 58. 48% or something. Oh, anyway. Pero, yun, binoboto lang nila yung mga mayayaman. Yun ang nag-decision. So to me, that's definitely just a formal democracy. It's not a real democracy. It's not a substantive democracy. And especially in the past 6 years, where there's so much violation of human rights, which is also very central to democracy, I would say, naghihingalo na talaga yung demokrasya natin. Parang, it's like, maybe even in name, it's no longer a democracy. But it's getting worse in terms of, it's getting farther away from the ideals of a democracy.
So parang Doc, parang in other words, nagiging facade lang natin, or parang nagiging facade lang na okay, we are a democratic country. But in a sense, but in practice, no, parang yun nga
Yes.
ang nangyayari is ruled by elites. Parang ganon.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now Doc, we've talked about democracy, no, we've talked about parang a votation of majority of the people. No? And then of course, when we say votation, there are minorities, no. And of course, parang correct me if I'm wrong, dito po ba papasok yung work o yung aspect on the opposition when we say minority or opposition or something like that?
Yes. The presence of a real opposition kasi is also indicative of whether or not it is substantive democracy. Diba? Kasi, diba, remember the central message is consent. Ang consent kasi, madali yan ma-manipulate, diba? At ang real consent, dinidiskurso. Karamihan. So, ang work talaga ng opposition is to embody that consent or dissent. Diba? So, at hindi pwede na yes lang. Lahat yes. Diba? Kasi marami talagang conflicting interests in society. So, kailangan mong tanungin iba't ibang sections ng society, tama ba to? Yes ba to? Yes. And just a concrete example, kahit man lang, alimbawa, taas pamasahe, yung mga tricycle driver, yung mga jeepney driver, gusto nila ng taas pamasahe, 'di ba? Ayaw 'yon ng commuters. Yun pa lang, conflicting na 'yon. Sino nagdedesisyon 'yon, 'di ba? Kasama sila. Kaya nga ang democracy also is associated with negotiations, 'di ba? Ang hindi democratic yung nagko-coerce ka, force ka. Kaya nga ang sinasabi nila na kaya may kongreso, yun naman, nag-negotiate kayo, nagko-compromise kayo, ganun. Pero hindi pwede na walang discussion, walang debate. Hindi ka totoong demokrasya kung wala kang debate. Kasi ang bawat solusyon ay kailangan talagang debatehin. Diba?
Yeah.
Kasi wala namang may alam ng best solution. I mean, there's no one in the first place, how you deliver water. There could be many options. So which option to choose is a matter of decision making. So all the stakeholders should be able to take part of that. That is democracy. So, di ba? Kaya nga, for the people, by the people, of the people.
The
di ba?
people.
Para, by the people. Tapos, pag sinabi ko, ayoko yung pinili mong cabinet member, terorista na ako. Parang hindi na yata tama yun. Di ba? Parang sa konsepto ng for the people, by the people. Parang, di ba? So, even the concept of people is very much abused also. Sino ba ang people, diba? So the task of the opposition, as I said, is to, in a democratic setup, is to make sure there are more democratic features than undemocratic features, right? So to really push for the presence of democratic Diba? Yung to really challenge. For example, the idea na lahat na lang na nananalo, political families, hindi ba natin tatanungin, demokrasya pa ba yan? Ba't walang magsasaka dyan? Diba? Ano na ba tayo? Terorista ba ako pag tinanong ko yon? Ang nilalabanan ko lang, yung mismong konsepto ng demokrasya. So sagutin mo ako, kung ang konsepto mo ay demokrasya na walang magsasaka, magdidebate talaga tayo. Kasi parang you bastardize the very notion of democracy. That, supposedly it's inclusive. Sama-sama tayo lahat, hindi kayo lang. So, did I answer your question?
Yes. I think
yes.
I think it really goes on the line, no, na in a sense we live in a plural society, no, and there's really different perspectives, and there should be I think what's scary siguro, and maybe we'd like to ask your comments about it, no, about the idea of being treated as enemies, no, of the administration. Na sometimes kasi, di ba, para marinig mo yan sa side comments, no, Philippines has too much democracy, di ba? Parang masyado tayo, lahat na lang pinapakinggan, lahat inaaway, etc. No, what are your thoughts on that whole discourse, di ba, that in a sense is used to say na nagiging enemy yung opposition kasi kayo yung nagpapabagal ng proseso, pinapatagal niya yung isang bagay na sana mas... What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really, it's about, ruling parties or ruling the elite, ruling elite coalitions trying to dominate discourse and trying to lessen to weaken the democratic, the democratic setup. Kasi pag tinignan mo, yung konsepto naman ng enemies, theoretically, wala namang enemies basta walang use of force, right? No? Kasi ang konsepto naman ng isang estado, ang isang estado lang ang may legal coercive power. Legitimate coercive power. At yung coercive power na yon ay through our courts, for example. Diba? So kung mag-aaway kayong magkapitbahay, walang ibang may karapatan na mag-resolve sa inyo na binding except the courts. Except the laws, for example. And pag merong threat, kaya may military, kaya nga, yung estado lang ang merong, ang may karapatan magkaroon ng arms. Right? Ang estado lang ang may karapatan na humawak ng armas kasi yung paghawak na yon ay dapat batay lang sa pangangailangan ng estado. Di ba? To coerce if necessary. Halimbawa, meron ng aggression, di ba? Yung estado lang magsasabi, di ba? So, kaya nga ang idea is, walang ibang dapat may army except yung estado. Halimbawa, yung pag sinabing New People's Army, ganyan, di ba? Yan, parang enemies agad yan ng state, no? Ganun yung pag-isip nila. Kaya lang, again, hindi nga substantive talaga, yung hindi lumalalim ba sa usapin? Kasi, una, kung meron kang New People's Army, the same way meron kang MILF or MNLF previously, tatanungin mo dapat, ba't may ganun? Diba? Iba yung talagang nagnanakaw lang, pumapatay lang, ganyan.
Yeah.
Ito parang may pinaglalaban sila eh. So, tatanungin mo ngayon, no? And in a democratic setup, your option is always to go into peace processes na. That's always a peace process. Kasi halimbawa, kung may pinaglalaban sila, kahit patayin mo sila lahat, kung tama yung sinasabi nila na may conditions talaga para lumaban, meron na namang ibang grupo dyan. So, wala namang pakawala ang government. Ang matinong gobyerno, makikipag-usap pa rin. Alam yun, ano ba problema? Ba't kayo nag-aalmas? Kasi dapat hindi kayo nag-aalmas, kami lang. Diba? Pero, pag ang sagot mo ay patayin mo lang silang lahat, di mo naman mapapatayan eh. It's always, that has always been proven na kumbaga ang idea kasi na parang kung sa tingin mo, enemy, yung isang grupo, meron namang tumitingin sa kanila na freedom defenders sila. O freedom fighters sila. So, di ba? Especially now that yung terorismo, ganyan. So, and of course, it's a function of who controls the narrative. And I think the task of the opposition is to challenge that narrative. Diba? Parang, Ano naman yung terorismo? Nagsuso lang ng terror. Ba't sinong tinaterrorize nila? Di ba? Paano kung halimbawa, mga magsasaka na magsasabing, ay, hindi kami talaga papayag. Nakukunin nyo lang yung lupa namin. Tagal na namin dito. Di ba? Mag-aarmas sila. Ano, enemy na sila of the state. Pinaglalaban lang naman nila yung lupa nila. Hindi naman nila gustong i-take over yung gobyerno. Diba? I mean, of course, ibang usapin pa yun. Yung takeover ng gobyerno. So, very misleading. Very, kasi, yun nga ang task mo is to push government for your certain needs. Diba? Kasi ang mandate naman, kaya kami gobyerno para alagaan yung society. So kung hindi na niya yung ginagawa, either palitan mo or i-push mo siya ng i-push. So the general task of the opposition is really to fiscalize and to check and serve as check and balance, to hold accountability. And there are many forms to do that. Right? So parang ano lang, minsan inisip ko, parang katamaran na lang. Parang ayun na lang nila intindihin talaga ang problema. Parang mas madaling isipin, enemies yan, sige, ano na, parang feeling ko, parang nakakabobo ang ganong klaseng pag-isip. Hindi mo inaalam, at sila nag-arma, di ba? So of course, madali din sabihin, niloloko lang naman nila tayo, di ba? Niloloko ba kayo na mga taong nagpapakamatay din? Diba? Namamatay din sila. So baka hindi rin naman ito lokohan lang. So yun ang dapat pinapalalim din na pag-intindi. I mean, I don't promote violence. I don't believe really in violence. But what I'm saying is that we have to be better at understanding our society, even the conflicts, or maybe especially the conflicts in our society. And armed conflicts are always indicative of social conflicts. So yun ang hanapin mo. Huwag mo sabihin enemies na lahat. And now, even especially under the Duterte regime, nag-iba din yun ng meaning, di ba? Enemy ka, pag hindi mo gusto si tatay, hindi mo gusto enemy ka pag hindi mo gusto yung drug war niya, pag parang, ay nako, enemy ba ako pag sinabi ko, hindi ako naniniwala, dapat tatay ang presidente, di ba? So, magkaiba lang tayo ng views. And the idea of the democracy nga is that, you don't penalize me for my democratic views. I might be penalized for some actions, but again, that's subject also to discourse. So, yeah, ano talaga to, parang, feeling ko ginagawa nilang excuse yung enemies to just further their control on society. So this is really about control of society, which again is very much different from the idea of democracy, which is consent.
Doc, you mentioned earlier that yung some specific functions of the opposition towards, shall we say, challenging policy making, and then of course to have checks and balances, diba? But if you look at how the opposition functioned for the past few years, how can you describe the opposition's works for the past years? No, parang are they really doing the challenging aspect, or ang ginagawa nila is just kung meron lang silang mapuna, pinupuna lang nila, pero wala naman silang ginagawang or wala naman silang sinasabing alternative movements or alternative policies.
Yeah. Okay, so if you talk about in concrete terms, you'll have to really differentiate. There's opposition from within government, and there's opposition from without. Minsan sinasabing merong mainstream opposition, yung nasa or institutional opposition, meron din namang non-institutional opposition sa labas. So, halimbawa, pag pinag-usapan mo yung institutional opposition, sa panahon ni Duterte, di ba, nauso yung supermajority. Right? Yun nga na parang sobra na silang marami. Parang done deal na ito. Ganyan. So yun ang supermajority. No? And of course, that's a lack of opposition. Di ba? So that's practically dismissing the idea of an opposition. Kasi nag-claim ka na na opposition, na super majority siya. So, wala siyang advantage at all for Democrat, except for the ruling party. Kasi, ang ibig sabihin nun, na pag may super majority ka, wala kang obstacle at all. Diba? Wala kang, lahat ng gusto mo. Kaya nga may culture of impunity kasi, lahat ng gusto ng gawin ng Malacanang, they can get away with it Kasi, ina-assume na nila, may bas-bas na yan sa Congress. I mean, of course, they go through the motion, nag-first reading sila, second reading nila. Pero, totoo lang, di ba? Death penalty, sinabi ni Digong drug war, anti-terrorism, di ba? So, yung supermajority is undemocratic. That idea is undemocratic. So yun yung nangyayari ngayon sa mainstream politics. Ibang usapin pa yung nasa labas, no, na nagsusubok, for example, na maging opposition. Baka ibang usapin yun. But the supermajority, and I think ang kailangan nating ipalalim, bakit sila nagsasama-sama? Okay? Normally, in advanced democracies, majority ka or ruling coalition ka, depending on a platform. Depending on, pareho kasi kayo talaga ng naiisip na tungkol sa taxation, tungkol sa education, tungkol sa health. Yun ang totoong coalition, na ruling coalition. Tapos may opposition ka kasi iba ang pagtingin nila sa taxation, sa health, sa education. Dito sa atin, hindi. Ang konsepto lang kung sino ang majority ay sino pipili ng speaker na to. Di ba? Kaya nung si GMA, kung sino bumoto kay GMA, siya na ang siya na ang majority. Nung, sino ba yung isa? Si Lord Velasco? So nung pumalit na si Lord Velasco, yun na yung supermajority. Hindi sumama doon, yun ang minority. When in fact, the concept is, the majority means pinakamaraming nanalo during the elections, no? On the assumption na party politics, then, and ang opposition mo is based on opposition to the policies of that ruling party. So, for example, kung sa ibang bansa, kung ang Conservative Party ang nananalo, di ba? Expect mo ang opposition, yung Left Party or yung Green Party. Kasi magkaiba sila ng mga polisiya. Dito sa atin, hindi yan like, for example, in the Senate now, tignan niyo talaga, sino na lang ang opposition? Sino ang totoong may ibang, di ba? I mean, come on, Alan Peter Cayetano is an opposition. And now he will be opposition just because, well, they say he was independent. But again, sa huli, labanan yan. Sino na ang, di ba? Sino ang boboto kay Mig Zubiri? Sino ang boboto? Kung hindi ka, so kung halimbawa si Alan Peter, hindi siya boboto kay Zubiri, magiging minority siya. Pero my gosh, totoo bang minority siya? Di ba? So, so it's going to be a fake minority. I think only Senator Riza is the real minority. So, yung consistent talaga in terms of the policy. Di ba? I mean, so, that's, yun na, ang sinasabi ko nga kanina pa na parang, ano lang talaga yan? Parang forma. Hindi siya totoo. So even the concept of majority. And of course, even during Pinoy's time, for example, remember, hindi rin naman majority president si Pinoy, di ba?
Yes.
So how do you get support in the legislature? Doon papasok yung mga pork barrel. Di ba? Kaya very disappointing na hindi man lang sinabi ni Pinoy na, alisin na natin yung pork barrel. Hindi sinabi yun kasi paano pupunta sa kanya yung mga kongresista? So this idea of alliances in our legislative branch, it has been so distorted already na parang, this is also about the dynamics between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So parang, diba, ikaw presidente, gusto mo ng isang piece of legislation, hindi mo naman kapartido yung nasa Kongreso, ang gagawin mo, in a way, bribery ang pork barrel diba? Diba? In the same manner, alam niyo ba bakit ang huweteng laganap sa baba, sa local officials? Kasi kung mayor ka, di mo naman kapartido yung kailangan mo huweteng money. pambayad sa mga counselors mo na, uy, sumama na kayo sa akin. Iyan. So it's that kind of dynamics that really creates these very superficial unities. So, hindi naman talaga yan. So, ano ba pinagsasamahan nila? Diba? I mean, to me, like, even yung death penalty, for example, pag tinanong mo yun sila, I'm sure they don't care about the death penalty. They don't really maybe even know ano. So, they don't care. Basta, yun ang dito tayo nakahanay. Dito tayo makikinabang, dito lang tayo. So, yan, wala nang. So, it's just policy lang. Hindi naman totoo na naiintindihan nila yung implication ng lahat. So,
Yeah. Thanks for that, Doc Abao, no? I think it gives us a good sense nga that at least in the Philippines, no, parang in a sense, the alliances are also so personalistic, no, rather than policy positions. I think in other countries, very clear, di ba? I am opposition because clearly yung set of policies of the ruling party is not aligned, no, with the policies that I also want to push, no. And maybe I guess one of the tensions I would have is, in a sense, magkakaroon ng gridlock yan, di ba? Parang how then does the opposition also for you, no? Does the opposition also supposedly serve as an alternative? Like, are they the ones that propose alternative narratives, alternative discourses, alternative policies? Kasi ngayon yung dating, di ba? Parang when you hear people comment on the opposition, parang antagonistic lang kayo. Parang anti-everything lang kayo. But, di ba, in the word opposition, di ba, parang oppose, di ba? But is that really all, no, to the whole thing, no? And how would you assess even our Philippine opposition when it comes to that? Both, I guess, institutional and external. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yung sa institutional kasi ang hirap talaga maging opposition kasi, for example, during the time of Duterte, parang ang positioning kasi niya, siya na ang alternative. Di ba?
Okay.
Di ba? Problema nga yung previous, yung mga dilawan, eto na, ako na ang alternative. Ako na yung opposition. So ano pang opposition pinagsasabi niyo dyan? No? And he was able to control the narrative so much na yun nga, nuisance na lang yung iba.
Yeah.
Kasi siya na yun siya ang totoo. Yun ang narrative ni Duterte. So, ayun, and I think the opposition would really just have to, kasi ang opposition voice din eh. So, ganun ngayon, if you're told to shut up, just don't shut up, that would make you an opposition as well. No? And that's really the business of opposition. To say, sandali lang, may sasabihin pa ako. Di ba? So, yun. I think the problem with the non-mainstream naman opposition is very fragmented also. So anyway, I think that's something also that really needs to be examined.
Okay. I think that kind of fits the sense, no? I guess if you're always opposing, di ba? Talagang wala kang mapapasa din na legislation at lalo lang maiirita. I guess yung voters, no? I think that's gonna be the gridlock that would happen. Yeah.
But a part of it also, actually, if you look at those who are opposing, they have naman ideas eh. They have actually proposals. Pero hindi na nga umaabot doon kasi nga na-demonize na sila na gusto. Parang maiingay lang yan. Pero halimbawa, nag-iingay yung mga jeepney drivers. Meron naman yan silang proposal eh. Diba? Ang labor doon sa end contractualization, meron naman yan silang proposal. Diba? Di lang umaabot sa mga tamang proseso, sa mga nararati. Kaya syempre, uulit-ulitin mo. Kasi nga, hindi umaabot eh. Diba? So, meron naman. May proposals. But they are always dismissed. And, and then demonized nga eh. So yun yung. And then of course may fear factor pa, di ba?
Yes.
So,
Threats.
Yeah, so yun.
Doc, kanina, no, you've made mention of the supermajority, ganung mga bagay, no, and of course it's more focused on the legislative branch, di ba? Like if creating or crafting a policy, ganyan, ito yung opposition na nag-roll, and medyo mahina yung minority ngayon kasi yun nga, because of the concept of the supermajority, no. Pero of course, if we go to other branches of, like, we go to the local level, di ba? Like napapansin natin, like ang mga political parties, no, for example, the Liberal Party ngayon, kumukonte sila, no, because even in the local government, no, yung mga local politicians lumilipat ng ibang political party, which is yung in line with the current administration na party. Now, ngayon, ang question ko is ganito. How do you see this kind of practice? Now, is this a good practice na ginagawa ngayon sa Pilipinas, no? Like yung mga politicians nagiging balimbing, parang wala silang own stand on their advocacy or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it just means that, we don't really have real parties. I mean, kasi ang real party kasi may posisyon. Eh. At hindi binabago ang posisyon batay sa kung sinong papasok. Diba? May posisyon na siya. Kung papasok ka, ibig sabihin kasi nun, sangayon ka sa posisyon ng partido. So, for example, yung Liberal Party, alam mo, lagi na yung, parang na-demonize din yung Liberal Party. And to me, that's really paradoxical kasi in the sense, parang siyang naging central tuloy na opposition. When in fact, if you look at the history of the Liberal Party, my God, they've been there ever since. They have always been government. I mean, they're like a minor party of the government, no? Depending kung they were there under Cory. Okay? They were there under Fidel Ramos. In terms of cabinet positions, they were there. Okay? The LP was there. Sinong sumunod kay Ramos? Si Erap. Nandun din naman sila. Kay GMA, nandun din sila until lang na nag-resign. Yung iba. But, I have never really actually seen the LP as opposition in that sense. Because they have always... So, pag tinignan mo in that light, you will see even the Liberal Party has an accountability. Because if you say that all those governments failed, you were part of all those governments. Right? So, ibig sabihin, pumayag kayo. Contractualization happened under you too. Di ba? Kasi, kasama ka dun eh. Di ba? Ramos pa lang. So, grabe na ang liberalization, etc. So, to me, masyadong, how would you call it? Parang overrated ang LP as an opposition. Naging opposition na naman siya after Pinoy, no? During Duterte. And if you look at it, makikita mo rin, marireflect mo rin yung gaano katotoo ang pagiging partido niya kasi nung naging Duterte na, nagkaroon na ng supermajority. Ibig sabihin, lahat ng
Nagsilapat.
party, lumipat doon. Diba? So sa akin, ang gusto ko rin message sa mga Duterte, sa mga Marcos, stop it na. Parang, yung pinagtutukoy nyo. Wala na nga super majority na nga kayo. And in the first place, ever since, even nga with GMA, di ba? So parang, hindi, yung parang, sana ang tutukan natin ng pansin, yung, hindi ko naman sinasabi na yung LP, pag hindi siya nag-opposition, hindi na siya opposition, nag-opposition naman siya talaga during the time of Duterte. Ang sinasabi ko lang, don't blow it out of proportion in terms of how you view, di ba? The oppositional nature of the Liberal Party, di ba? Parang, lugar niyo naman. Wag naman na parang, uy, yan, ang dilawan, ang dilawan, lahat yan na nakibaka kay Marcos ng panahon, noong 1986. Kasi yung yellow, of course, naging associated with Aquino, with ganyan. Pero as I always say, hindi naman kami pumunta sa EDSA dahil kay Aquino. Pumunta kami sa EDSA dahil kay Marcos. Ay namin sa Marcos. At natuwa kami na may Aquino naman na kasi sa huli may eleksyon eh. Di ba? Napatawag siya ng snap election. So imagine mo, siyempre susuportahan namin kung sino man lumaban kay Marcos. So that was the idea of the yellow movement. No, it wasn't just the Liberal Party. My God, when Cory Aquino became government, she did not even want a party. She even said, "Oh, I'm above parties," and then she joins Piping Cojuangco's party, which is what, LDP. It wasn't even the Liberal Party, diba? So why are you associating the ano? So, pero that's already again politika controlling the discourse, no? Di nila. So to me, halimbawa, yung ano na ang difference ng yellow at pink. I guess yung pink, yun nga like ko sinasabi, sama naman tayo sa yellow, pero may recognition na rin tayo na yung pinaglaban natin doon, hindi talaga nagkatotoo. We wanted democracy. My God, our democracy is collapsing 30 years later. Di ba? We wanted less poverty. There's still very much, poverty. We wanted reformers in government. My God, all we have are political families in government. So I think you are, to me, the color of consent of protest now is pink. And of course, red, meron din naman. No? Ang pink kasi mas less ideological kaysa non-ideological kaysa sa ano. Pero all of that, I think may recognition na tama naman ang pinaglaban natin. Kasi mali talaga ang diktadura. Mali talaga ang pumapatay-patay lang. Di ba? Yung killing policy, mali yung repression, mali yung wala kang freedom. Di ba? Parang sa totoong buhay, pag tinapakan ka, hindi ka ba aaray? Aaray ka. Di ba? Yun ang demokrasya. So, tama yung pinaglaban natin yun. Yun lang, yung gusto sana natin isuta, hindi nangyari. So, the work really is supposed to continue. Diba? You're not supposed to just say na, diba? You're not supposed to be personalistic. Right? So, hindi yan si Aquino, hindi yan si Leni Robredo. Kung yan sa pinaglalaban namin. Parang, nasa na yung sinabi natin, diba? At saka ang dami ding namatay, ha? During the Marcos, diba? In defense of EDSA, thousands died as well. Thousands disappeared. There's so many people tortured who are even alive today to really say, to say they were tortured. So sa akin yun ka parang dinistort na lahat just for political ends. Diba? Kasi halimbawa, mas madali kasing sabihin, boto mo na lang si tatay kasi uubusin niya yung mga dilawan. Hindi mo na inalam ano ba ang dilawan. So parang
lagi ko yung sinasabi in our voters education. Tapos sinasabi ko, okay, when you say ayaw nyo sa dilawan, pero kung tutuusin yung mga sinasabi nyo dilawan, nasa ano na ngayon? Nasa administrasyon na ngayon. So parang the question is, nawala ba talaga? No? Nawala ba talaga yung mga dilawan na sinasabi nyo? Or I'm referring to Dilawan kasi yun yung parang nagiging nagiging famous na narrative na if you are Dilawan, you are very very against the government or against the administration, which is really not a good notion, no? Sir Carlo, do you have something to add?
Yeah. Actually, my sense is that parang I'm really picking up the idea, no, that it's a weapon of the ruling party, no, in a sense yung propagandist, ginagamit talaga yung pinklawan, dilawan, opposition, and they're trying to box, no, in a sense, di ba, to box this set of people and say hindi sila legitimate, right? Like that's basically it, right? That they are not legitimate. Tayo yung magsusulong ng pagbabago, no? Parang ganun yung I guess now we do understand that. We felt that all over civil society for the past 6 years, and we don't know what will happen in this administration also. But I guess from your sense, no, what then does the opposition or those who may not fully agree with government policies do moving forward? What should be done? Kasi the elections was a clear, di ba? Parang it was a clear referendum, di ba? Parang it was a sense that 60% of your population said, that we're not gonna vote for supposedly the opposition, parang gano'n, no? And the idea now is what needs to be done moving forward so that ma-legitimize yung idea ng opposition, hindi lang tayo makulong, and there's actually a chance, no, that maybe in the next elections, no, mas magkakaroon ng balance of powers in that sense. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think the task of the opposition is to say, uy, hindi tayo back to normal ha. Dahil lang biglang may nanalo na. Di ba? Kahit may nanalo na, kung ayaw mo sa kanya, sabihin mo. Di ba? Yun, and what are your reasons? So I think especially in terms of policies, for example, I mean, legitimate naman talaga silang nanalo. Diba? Na-declare sila. So legit sila. Wala tayong legitimacy issues. So ano lang ang pwede mong issues dyan? Ang issues mo lang ay policy issues. Okay? And of course, the issue of historical revisionism. Kaya halimbawa ako, I'm very much active in the labor and migration issue. So am I going to engage the new department? Am I going to still engage Dole? Of course. Of course. Diba? Because if I have something to say about policies, if I have something to say about, repatriation, about etc., if I have something to say, I will say it. Diba? But I will also continue to oppose the impunity of the Marcoses. Diba? So, kumaga, ang bottom line ko lang, wag nyo lang ipasabi sa akin na walang pinatay si Marcos na labor leader.
Yeah.
Diba? At na maliit na bagay lang yun. Kasi sa akin, hindi yun maliit na bagay. Diba? At wag mo lang sabihin na yung kalagayan natin ngayon ay walang kinalaman din sa mga ginawa ni Marcos. So, yun yung I think we can continue to engage, diba? Kasi, it's our right. Sa akin, ganun lang yun eh. When people ask, why are you going to engage? Well, because it's my right to engage. So, I'm just going to exercise my right. Is it going to be beneficial? Is it going to be successful? I don't know, and I don't care as long as I'm exercising my right. So, ganun ko siya tinitignan na yun, hanggat may sasabihin ko. Kung wala naman ako sasabihin, hindi ako magsasalita. Kung wala naman. Diba? So, parang ganon. But of course, the danger really of this Marcos, si Marcos, pag tinignan mo, very few weeks pa lang naman, at the very visible thing is that he is not as impulsive as Duterte. He is more careful. It remains to be seen whether he is also a killer like Duterte. Di pa natin nakikita yon. Posible din kasing hindi, di ba?
Yeah.
It is true that he has gotten good people in government. In other words, the technocrats, those who are experts in their fields, no? But the thing is, that's also the lesson nga of Marcos Sr. The technocracy, kung lagi ko yung sinasabi, ang technocracy, parang sinasabi mo lang, basta ganito lang yung root niyan. Let's leave politics out. So, di ba? So, parang, wala kaming pakialam kung diktador ka. Basta ganito ang economic growth. Basta ganito yung ano. But the point is, how can you grow when it's all coalition of elites, economic elites? Di ba? How can you grow if there's so much corruption? How can you, So, in other words, you can never leave politics out. And do you think these technocrats can actually influence politics? No. At the end of the day, they will just say, ito lang talaga ang economic growth, ito lang talaga yung ganyan. Papakaalaman ba nila ang formally? Hindi. Di ba? Malaking pinsala ba ang formally sa bansa natin? Of course. Pati sa ekonomiya natin. So you see, I would ask them, what are you contributing to that? Really? If that becomes the dominant mode. Of course, pwede mo rin sabihin, posible din may spaces. No? So sige, tignan mo. Basta alam mo lang, hindi technical solutions ang solutions to political problems. So, you cannot also segmentize all of that because that is all connected. Diba? Finance lang, taxation. My God, presidente mo pa lang hindi pa nagbabayad ng tax. Ano ka? Sure ka? Sure ka na gusto mong itulak yon na parang, diba, a successful taxation program? How can you say that? So, it's very complicated. There's no one way, diba? Kasi I cannot also say that, they're betraying principles. But to me, there's always a question of, do you really want to strengthen a Marcos regime? Right? Is that, diba? Does that make sense? Na you strengthen someone who won because of so much disinformation and so much is that really the government that you want to support? So, sa akin, of course, ayoko naman yung framework din na parang, uy, we hope that the government will be unsuccessful. Kasi pag unsuccessful ang government, tayo rin naman mapipinsala. Lalo pa yung mga pinakamahirap, 'di ba? Kung hindi maayos yung ayuda, sila din naman ang kawawa. So sabi ko lang, you have to see the bigger, never forget the bigger picture, 'di ba? Because sa huli, if you want to really solve poverty, for example, it's the bigger picture that will say whether they remain poor or not. So, I don't know if I make sense, but it's yeah, it's really very complicated. So to me, you need to engage. You need to stop historical revisionism. You need to engage policy. You just need to exercise your rights. Kasi our rights naman, imagine mo, so ano lang pala ang rights natin in between elections? Hindi naman pagboto lang ang rights natin in between elections. We have a right to participate in political discourse. Diba? We have a right to make claims. We have a right to organize, to freely assemble, to express our views. So let's exercise those rights. Whether or not mabubuwag natin yung supermajority. Pero feeling ko, pag hindi natin in-exercise yung rights natin, lalo talaga silang magmamayagpag. Diba? If people just say, wala, forget rights. So I think that will really be the death of democracy in the Philippines if that happens. So, yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much, no, Doc Abba, for the very insightful inputs that you've given us, no. And yeah, Sir Carlo, do you want something to add?
No, actually, I think again I want to thank Doc Abao for the sharing. And what I'm sensing, no, is that in a sense it's really a challenge for us to, in a sense, creatively engage at certain policy levels where there are openings for, I guess, for good to happen, di ba? Parang if they have a listening ear, if they are democratic in their process, di ba? Na hindi nila shut down yung mga expertise din ng mga tao na sa supposedly what they brand as opposition, right? As long as they listen and consider proposals, di ba? We should, right?
Yes.
Sayang. And I think that's a way to get things done. But necessarily, if there are really may mga mali talaga, sure, di ba, na ayaw talaga natin yon. I think it is also the responsibility na mag-respond tayo with a critique, no? And whatnot.
Yeah. Parang wag din tayong tumigil dahil lang para mabubuting tao sila doon. Parang gano'n. Magagaling sila. Correct. So parang paubayan na lang natin din. Parang hindi din dapat gano'n. Di ba?
Correct.
Yeah. So parang at the end of the day, Doc, no, ang idea natin is that at the end of the day, dapat if ever meron mang mga taong nayuyurakan or yung mga taong shall we say na yung hindi pinaglalaban yung kanilang mga karapatan. So as opposition, no, in viewing meron mang policies na nakaka-apekto sa ibang mga tao in a negative sense, no? Maybe dito sana papasok na the opposition can do things that can shall we say defend, no, other people's advocacy and other people's rights then. So again, thank you very much, Doc Carmel Abao, no, for giving your time here sa Radyo Katipunan sa ating Kwentuhang Bayan. So muli, mga katipunero at katipunera, no, marami tayong natutunan ngayon, maraming aspect in our government that sometimes hindi lang natin na mababasa talaga sa social media. And at the end of the day, yung sinasabi nating dilawan, pinklawan, or ano ba talaga, kalaban ba sila ng government? Maybe yes on our perspective, maybe no in others' perspective, but in the perspective of a true democracy, the position is really important for us to have a better and greater Philippines. And yun. So sinabi ni Doc Abo kanina, no, ang nangyayari ngayon sa ating democracy is parang somehow a facade, no, and it's a good thing to ask na how are we contributing sa pagiging ganito na sa ating demokrasya. So maybe there's more discussions na mangyayari in the future. And again, thank you for being here with us, no, and pakikinig sa ating radio program. Muli, maraming salamat and see you in our next episode.
Palalimin ang kamalayan sa mga isyong napapanahon. Makisangkot at makiisa kasama ang Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan, ang socio-political apostolate ng Kapisanan ni Jesus. Ito ang Kuwentuhang Bayan mula alas 11 ng umaga tuwing Biyernes dito lang sa Radyo-Katipunan 87.9 FM. Dahil naniniwala kami na posible ang isang mas mabuting lipunan at maaari itong simulan sa isang kwentuhan. Radyo Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan.